You remember how I talked about the good way of doing it? Don't use the word but, don't use the word if, be specific, let it be timely, etc. So now what I want to do, and by the way, what I'm about to share is what I've shared for 20 years in private industries, CEOs, CFOs, top executives. This whole thing on apologies is something that I've spoken on a lot. So it's a very important topic to me. So one of the things I found that really worked for audience members would be not just me telling them, don't do this, this, or this, but to read out some famous apologies from people they recognize and then let the audience give a grade. Now, I know we went to different kinds of schools, but even in the public school, the grades were they A, B, C, D, and F?
Sometimes for when you did your exams, your proper exams, yeah,
Yes.
yes, they were
Okay, we'll
ABC.
just go with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, because we're going to grade these A, B, C, D, and F. So you know what that means. We're all pretty calibrated around the world with that system. And I'm going to read you what happened and what the apology was verbatim. And then I'm going to let you give a score, a grade, and I'll just be doing this with you, Matt. But then you got to give a reason why you gave that grade. What clues? So we're going to start. We're going to start with a gentleman who was an American, well known by a lot of people, Rush Limbaugh, who has since passed away. In 2006, he had to backtrack after confronting Michael J. Fox for exaggerating the effects of Parkinson's disease. So he made the acquisition, he's faking it, and then he found out it was real. So here's his apology. Remember the components. I will bigly, hugely admit that I was wrong, and I will apologize to Michael J. Fox if I am wrong in characterizing his behavior on this commercial as an act. What grade?
I mean, I think it doesn't even. I'm not even sure if I'd give it an. Is an F the lowest one?
F is the lowest.
I'd probably give it a G.
Okay, guys, listen, if you're listening in, no matter if this is when these are initially released or maybe 10 years later, it doesn't matter. Throw down in a comment what grade you would give that one. Just say rush dash. We're going to do this for a few.
Do you want the reason?
Okay.
Do you want the
Excuse me?
reason? Do you want the reason?
Yeah, give me the reason.
Or I can give the reason is because he seems to say he was wrong, and then he
Yep.
says if I'm proved wrong. So it's like it's like that's the contradiction. So it's not
And that
impossible.
contradiction was all set up by a two-letter word, if.
Mm.
Remember? Don't put a but in there and don't put a if. I will visually admit I was wrong and I'll apologize if I am wrong in characterizing. That word if takes away the whole apology. Next one, Pete Rose, famous baseball player in America, who has been kicked out of baseball. He can't get in the Hall of Fame because he bet on baseball. And so after finally admitting that he had bet on baseball, he had denied it for years. Here's his apology. I'm sure that I'm supposed to act all sorry or sad or guilty now that I've accepted that I've done something wrong. But you see, I'm just not built that way. I'm sorry it happened, and I'm sorry for all the people, fans, and family that I hurt. Now let's move on. Okay, give us a grade.
I give that an E. I'd give that an E because
You're saying it's one notch above the F, but
to,
it's still not
yeah,
a good.
it's because it's there's really appreciate the honesty. He's kind of being honest. He doesn't want to apologize. He does feel people were hurt,
Good.
but the now let's move on.
That one
That's
is it.
not your
That
call.
sentence.
That's not
Listen,
your call to make. That's not your call to make. And that's been the problem with the church, by the way. Now let's move on. No, 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 no. You don't. The abuser doesn't get to decide when we're on.
preach it, and you're exactly right. By the way, just think: if I'm apologizing to my wife for cheating on her, and I'm sorry I slept with the neighbor, and I know I shouldn't have done it, and I'm really sorry I did it. Now let's move on.
Good luck.
She's going to tell me to move on. She's going to tell me to. So great job on that. Great job with the grade again. What grade would you put down for Pete Rose? If you want to make it in the comment, because that's pretty strict grading there with an E. Okay, next one is Marv Albert, and he is one of our sports announcers for years and years, biggest sports announcer, and he got accused of sexual assault, including biting the woman. And his public apology was, "I'm sorry if she felt she was hurt."
I mean, okay, I've got to be honest with the if thing. Okay, so the if thing, I wanted to bring up the if thing because sometimes the if can be, look, I see it a different way, and we need to have a further conversation about this. So, so if he's been proved that he definitely did bite her and he did abuse her, then yeah, it's a G. It's a G because it's not whether she, it's not if she was hurt, she was hurt. But sometimes, because sometimes I use the if not as an end, but like, listen, I'm not seeing it this way. Can we talk about this? But I hear
That's
you.
different, and that's different.
But I think you're right. I think it's a G. I think that has to be a G.
Okay. Charles Barkley is a famous basketball player all around the world and is known for a big mouth and saying wrong things. This time he was a little different. This was after a DUI, driving while intoxicated, driving under the influence arrest. This was his apology. Clearly, everybody knows I got a DUI. That's unacceptable. It was 100% my fault. I screwed up. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Hey,
So, Charles Barkley, Mr. Big Mouth,
yeah.
gets the A. And by the way, before you say, someone probably wrote that for him, PR department, probably so. But that's the case with all these I've read. They all have PR agents, but they just do a horrible job with apologies. Thank you on that one. We don't even need to ask why. I think that okay, I'm excited about these. They're new ones I put in just for you and for our British audience. How about a few from well-known people in England? Let's see. I told you they're polite. I told you in my earlier edition, Englishmen, politeness. That's just how I view them. So, this is Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who, by the way, I had not heard of, apologized to the mathematician Alan Turing, who committed suicide in 1954 after he was tried and convicted of gross indecency for being a homosexual. Most of us saw the movie. Listen to this Prime Minister's words. I feel emotion even to read it. On behalf of the British government and all those who live freely thanks to Alan's work, I'm very proud to say we're sorry. You deserved so much better.
Yeah, it's an A. I mean, it's an A. And actually, just in Gordon Brown had a terrible. He was not a bad chancellor, and then he went to be prime minister, and it all fell apart. And then his campaign was like the worst campaign. He got caught on a microphone talking about a woman he shouldn't have been talking about. But actually, Gordon Brown was quite a decent guy, and I think genuinely believed his politics. He was quite a sincere politician. So yeah,
Well, you can see how much he impressed me.
yeah.
Okay, next one, English. Benedict Cumberbatch issued an apology after referring to black actors as colored. Here's his apology. Let's give a grade. I'm devastated to have caused offense by using this outmoded terminology. I offer my sincere apologies. I make no excuse for my being an idiot, and I know the damage is done. The most shaming aspect of this for me is that I was talking about racial inequality in the performing arts in the UK. I feel the complete fool I am to have offended people.
Yeah, I'd give it an A.
Me too.
I give it a no.
It's
And
those are.
ironically, he's the guy who played Alan Turing.
I know. That's why I did the two
Oh,
of them
sorry,
together.
sorry. Yeah, 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 of course.
By the way, I just found those two recently, and I thought, since you brought up the church, how about some comments like this from our leaders? You've had 900,000 people bolt. You have people going through therapy. You have people that don't even want therapy and need it. We have people that gave all their money. Why not some of these comments? Why don't we hear maybe on behalf of the leadership? We're sorry. You deserved so much better. Why can we not hear that? Why can we not hear devastated to learn that I caused offense by this outmoded thinking? I offer my sincere apology. I make no excuse for my being an idiot, and I know the damage is done to so many of you out there around the world. Why can we not hear that? Someone explain to me why the Holy Spirit can rest on the head of this prime minister or this actor to make apologies hard to that extent. But in the church where we taught we were the only ones with the Holy Spirit, it's nowhere to be found. It's nowhere to be found. You got to go to the world if you want serious apologies like this. Kip McKean, after telling James that he was a dumb jock and would never be a leader in any church except for a teen ministry, I'll say I'm sorry, but you had better never, never call me to meet with you over a situation like this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a G.
You don't even have to answer because it's obvious. And that was our leader. That's our founder. That's the man that God has said, you are the modern day miracle. You are the guy. You're my prophet. Really? Really? Few quotes I love on apologies. One person said, you forgive someone who wasn't even sorry. That's strength. Morgan Oliver, I forgave you. I was never given because my closure was never tied to a single one of your words. It was dependent upon my willingness to let go. I don't want to be pushy with these quotes because if you're at different levels of frustration or upset or even rage, here's one I knew you'd like. An apology without change is just emotional manipulation. Got to have the change. I'll close out apologies with this. I shared about this on eavesdropping. What would Bob Gimple, founding father, as far as I'm concerned? Yeah, I wouldn't mind calling him my father in the faith. Kip, I'm sorry. Bob, Doug's dad, Doug Arthur's dad. I shared about a time in 1980, before I even went to London, that I was in the Boston church and I was in the middle of a fellowship with Rob Gimple. And we were good friends. And all of a sudden, Kip came up and he was livid. You could just tell. And he kind of came between us. And he said, can I interrupt? And we said, of course. And then he laid into some guy, I can't remember who, that was in our church, in our fellowship right then. And he was talking about him to Rob. I could hear every word. And after he told Rob everything, Rob said, so why don't you just apologize to him? And Kip said, what? Me? Yeah, you're the leader. And Kip said, me? And he asked, he said, Kip, do you have any blame at all here? Out of 100, how much is your blame? And Kip said 10%, which, by the way, is probably not true. And the very fact he thought, though, if you think that way, anytime you're in an argument with somebody, if you think maybe you were 10% at fault, you can start right there and say, let's make a change. Because the odds of you only being 10% at fault are minuscule. But that's what Kip told him, 10%. And Rob looked right at him and said, so why not apologize for that? And that was profound to me. Because in my upbringing, I always thought if you were 50% or more to blame, then you should initiate the apology. But Rob was like, even if you're 5%, apologize. And I say today, in closing, if Rob was still alive, and I wish he was, I can hear him saying to leaders of the movement, if the church has even 10% responsibility for so much pain that so many have experienced it, why not apologize for that? That was wisdom. And I want to close by saying, I don't want to make this just about the church that has done a horrible job, which has done worse than a horrible job with apologies. And now it's going to be even less of a chance because of lawsuits. Seriously. When people think that a lawsuit's happening or in the middle of it, apologies get tossed out of the window because everyone's afraid it will be used as evidence against me in court. By the way, nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing. If you'd apologize to begin with, there probably wouldn't even be lawsuits happening right now. That's how important it is. But I want to say not just for church leaders apologizing for the condition of the church and the hurt of the church. I want to take this to every one of us individually. Who do we have that deserves an apology from us? Who in our family deserves an apology from us? I mean, we're making mistakes all the time. Who in our neighborhood deserves an apology from us? Who at work? Who at work deserves an apology from us? And maybe it's not so much, in your case, the leaders that need to apologize to the million people. Maybe in your own Bible talk, in your own circle of friends that you meet with. Is there an apology that would be appropriate? Because watch what happens afterwards. I remember doing this speech in front of insurance people in Kentucky, and it was 12 noon when I finished. And an old gentleman, like the oldest guy in the whole place, came up to me and said, thank you for that. He's tears in his eyes. That message really affected me. And I'm here to say I won't be back. I won't be back today. I'm not coming back this afternoon. I said, really? He said, yes. I've already talked to my boss. I've got the rest of the day off. I'm going home where all my family and my relatives are right now. And I'm starting out doing some apologies that are way overdone. It's been way too long. And I'm taking off this afternoon from this seminar so I can go home and start making up for decades of apologies that I never gave. I'll never forget that. My life never felt so good as that day. Seeing that older man, he must have been 75 or 80, walking afterwards. To think that at that age he could pick up on this lesson and see the need. And that's why I like to share it whenever I can. Closing comments, Matt?
Yeah, there's thanks, James. I think the thing that I just wanted, the point I wanted to make, because I've heard this from ICOC leaders. I don't think it's just their thing, but it's especially true. I said, well, I apologized, like, because in 2003 there were apologies, there was letters, and there was. So when you bring up stuff and they go, well, I apologize for that, it's because I think the minute you go, I apologize for that, there's a problem. There's an indication that you don't understand that you might have apologized, but the pain carries on, or maybe there's something that wasn't fully covered.
Beautiful point. Wonderfully made. Totally agree. And by the way, we have a famous comedian here that last year was going to be the MC of the Oscars, big time, once in a lifetime deal. And when all of a sudden, after he was signed up with everything, they found a joke he did 20 years ago, a trans joke that today is found to be very offensive. And they said, "You need to apologize for this joke." And he said, "No, I apologized 20 years ago for that joke. You can look it up, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life apologizing again." He did not get the gig, so he never got the gig. It struck people as weird that he didn't want to make a comment about it now. And I've heard leaders say the same thing. "I apologized 20 years ago." Yeah. By the way, remember the example of "I cheated on you, honey," with the neighbor, and "I'm sorry I did it. Now let's move on."
It's the same thing.
Imagine 10 years from now, she's crying, saying, "I just have that doubt. Or do you really love me? Or are you looking for a younger woman like the neighbor?" How dare you bring that up? I apologized for that infidelity 12 years ago. You have no right to bring that up. No, it's another beautiful example to apologize again, maybe differently, maybe even more fully, maybe even with something new added, and you can thank them. You know what I tell people? The most powerful thing you can do before an apology, this is for business, home, is when they give you the accusation, when they say you messed up with this, instead of being defensive, which is what they're expecting, to say thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Whether it is a bill that you are debating at a store about how much is owed, or something on the phone with customer service, or a spouse or a child, it doesn't matter. But when they say, "It really hurt my feelings when you did this," to start out by going, "Well, thank you, first of all, for bringing that up to me. Thank you for doing that so that I could be aware and apologize." That's so powerful. And the idea that it was done once 20 years ago, it's more of a sign that either you didn't mean it or it was so hard to do, it's not worth repeating. So I think that's a phenomenal point that you left us with.
And James, just that thing you said there, because also you fully understand it more. Like I've apologized for things, and then as you go through life, you're like, oh my gosh, I really now I understand why I did it, how they felt. I mean, it's not about. I think if you see apologies about as scoring points or as a sort of power struggle, when an apology becomes a power struggle or it's not
Yeah.
it's not an apology. It's like, oh, this is a weapon, or this
Yeah.
is me being vulnerable so they can attack. It
That's a different platform.